Welcome back to my channel, everyone, for another review of Desperate Housewives. Today I'm talking about why season 6 was a good season but not my favorite, and I've made loads of other videos following the different seasons and my reactions to them, so I'll link that playlist down in the description so you can check it out. I think this is the final video I'm going to do before I do my overall recap of the show in its entirety. I was going to do another video recapping season 7 and then another one talking about season 8 and the characters, but I thought about it and I don't really see the point of doing that when I'm going to talk in detail about season 7 and 8 in my overall review of the show, and I don't want to be repeating myself, so I think that's what I'm going to do because it makes the most sense to me. To be honest, when I first started watching season 6, which I've just finished, the only parts of it that really resonated with me was the mystery involving the strangler and then the mystery of the new couple who'd moved in on the street. Anything mystery related, basically. But in terms of just the general characters and what was going on in their lives, I found it boring or repetitive, or there were just various issues I came across, and I'm worried that as the show drags on and they keep adding more seasons, they may run out of ideas or lose sight of what made the show really good. Mrs. McCluskey is still hilarious, and their two new gay neighbors are also really funny. They're called Bob and Lee, and although they don't contribute anything immensely important to the show, they're still really funny and they're such good comedic relief, so I really like them. I really love Mrs. McCluskey. The first thing I want to discuss is the two mysteries, because that's what made season 6 stand out from the other seasons I've seen so far, because it had two mysteries rather than one, which added this extra layer of complexity and stuff to figure out that I really was appreciative of, because in season 5, although it was great, there was only one mystery, and so at points it could feel a bit simplistic, a bit obvious, like, okay, there's not really that much going on here, there's not that much to keep up with. So that's what I'm going to start off with in this discussion. Before we get into it, I just want to let you know what I'm wearing on my face. The products will be listed in the description, and I've got these really cute feather earrings. So let's get into this review, which leads us to the introduction of Angie, the new housewife on the show, and someone who is a completely new breath of fresh air. Marc Cherry said that he wanted someone who had that blue collar vibe and not that typical suburban appearance. And so that's why the staff ultimately decided on Angie, an Italian New Yorker. The actress Drea did not know anything about the character's identity when she signed up for the role. She didn't know even the character's name or storyline, so she was a bit in the dark and worried about being typecast. But part of the deal when hiring her was that she only wanted to do one season of the show because she had a baby, and also she was eager to get back to New York. She's a smart talker and doesn't really match the vibes of the other more conservative housewives, which I thought was a really cool contrast to them, and so nice, especially when a lot of stuff was getting a bit slow and just not as interesting as it used to be. It was dragging on a bit, and every scene Angie was in, she made it really interesting. She can be quite blunt, at times tactless, but it comes from a place of being hurt in the past, so she's genuinely guarded and on the watch at all times for danger, and she will do anything to protect her family. You see scars on her back, and you know that her and her husband are running away from something, and they keep mentioning the FBI or police, so you know that maybe they were involved in something bad or they're hiding from something, but you don't know what. And it really was kept ambiguous for a lot of the show, which I also really liked because it was so mysterious. I was like, what is this couple's secret? Why is their son so weird? Angie hesitantly befriends the other women on the street, and her son Danny takes an instant liking to Julie, who's Susan's daughter. And then when Susan's daughter Julie gets strangled by some unknown assailant, luckily his alibi is validated, so Danny is cleared of all charges, but a lot of the other neighbors, especially Susan, are still suspicious of him, but he swore that he would never hurt Julie and that he genuinely cared about her. And you keep seeing reports of girls being strangled and killed. And one character we meet for a bit who starts dating Lynette's son Porter gets strangled. There's some dangerous person on the street, and that was such a scary and genuinely interesting subplot as well. And I liked that they were linked, but also two unrelated things. But when you go back to this couple that's been introduced, Angie later learns that Nick had an affair and cheated on her with Julie, which is obviously really weird because it means that he had a relationship with Julie, and his son Danny was also interested in Julie and had romantic feelings for her. How old is Julie at this point? I think she's like 24, but Julie ends up realizing that her relationship with Nick wasn't good. She doesn't know if she can really trust him to be good to her, but at the same time she also rejects his son Danny, and when Danny is rejected he takes a bunch of pills and overdoses. Luckily he's okay, but when he wakes up in the hospital he is a bit disorientated and he tells the nurse there that his name is Tyler, which it's not, and then we realize they may be under some kind of witness relocation program, but it's not, because then Danny reveals his family secret and it's actually way more dark than that. And so he tells the nurse everything, and her name's Mona, and she decides to use it to her advantage to like blackmail the family, or she'll go to the police about it. She demands money from them in return for her silence, but before she can carry through with this plan, there's a plane that crashes into a stereo lane and it kills her, so she doesn't get the chance to, which is very convenient. It's like every season they do like one or two disaster episodes. Like in season 3 they had the supermarket shooting, and then they have a fire, and then they have an earthquake, now they have a plane crash. They're getting exceedingly insane. I've never seen a street face more like murders and tragedy. It's actually hilarious. I don't know why everyone's still in the street. Why does no one move out? Later, Angie and Nick's son Danny begins dating Anna. You may not know anything about Anna because I didn't really get to talk about her much in my last video, but Anna is the new adopted niece of Carlos and Gabrielle, and she's a teenager as well, so they're actually way more suited. And she was a bit wild and rebellious for a lot of season 6 and making a lot of bad decisions and sneaking out of the house, but she takes a genuine liking to Danny that I think was way more than just his hot. I mean, it was at first, but she genuinely was interested in him, and he thought she was really shallow, but then they started connecting and realized they actually kind of got along, and I thought they were so cute. I'm not joking. I thought these two were so freaking adorable, and so they ended up bonding. He had these ideas about who she was, and she was like, oh my god, can you at least give me a chance, because you have all these ideas about who I am and what I'm like, and you don't even know me. Carlos and Gabrielle were really bothered by it because they didn't want her having sex. Because Gabrielle and Carlos are concerned about this, they're going over to Angie and Nick's house to talk to them, and they overhear Angie and Nick fighting about this secret they have. And it was one of my favorite scenes in the whole show because Carlos and Gabrielle both have their ear pressed to the door, feeding each other muffins, like she's putting one in his mouth. It was so good. But after overhearing that conversation, they're concerned about their niece's safety dating Nick and Angie's son. So they send Anna away to a modeling academy in New York to protect her. But then Danny goes to follow Anna and find her without his parents' knowledge. Gabby and Angie go to New York to follow them, and then Gabby says, hey, by the way, Angie, me and Carlos overheard some conversation, like what's the deal? And so Angie opens up to her and tells her her big secret. She says that she got involved with a really bad guy called Patrick, who was an eco-terrorist, and she actually was really good at making bombs, and now she's on the run from him. The child Danny actually is his child. She's really worried that he'll try and take Danny back or something. It actually reminds me a lot of the abusive relationship dynamic between Katharine and her ex-husband in season 4, because it's this idea of a woman being hunted down by like a partner. But Patrick ends up tracking down Angie anyway towards the end of the season and in the finale. So he takes her hostage and tries to get her to make a bomb for him, and he's going to try and kill the son Danny and make her watch, and he's got this whole awful revenge plan. Luckily, Angie manages to outwit him in the best way, and Gabrielle, who'd actually been helping her and knew what was going on, ended up realizing that Angie was in danger because Angie left her a note, like an SOS. So it was a really juicy finale as well, and it wrapped up in a good way. I thought that it was a very interesting mystery. It wasn't my favorite though, because again, Angie lacked chemistry with the other women because we weren't seeing her on screen enough with them, and that's something some critics noted, that she was a bit too uninvolved with what was going on, similar to Betty Applewhite in season 2. Like, she was just too detached from them. And also, her as an ex-eco-terrorist sounds a little bit ridiculous. I genuinely warmed to Angie's character, but not enough, and I think that's because, again, like so many other new characters, she's only there for a season and disappears, and because she didn't spend much time with the other women. I did like her a lot, but it's a shame she just left after one season. That happens a lot in this show. They build into something, they set up this great plot point, and then when they really could deliver, when they could properly milk it, they just forget about it and then get distracted by some new idea and then go down that route, and it's quite annoying actually. But now I want to talk about what each woman gets up to in this season and what I thought of their storylines. So I think we'll start off with Susan. The first episode of the 6th season airs, and so we get to see who Mike marries, whether it's Susan or whether it's Katharine, because in the finale of the last season, you know that he's marrying someone and you see someone under a veil, but it's kind of ambiguous as to who he chose. We're pretty sure it's Susan, but we're not like fully sure. But then in season 6, it opens with Mike and Susan getting married. It's like a flash forward to their wedding. But Marc Cherry told Entertainment Weekly that the bride's initial identity was actually going to be Katharine, and that Susan was the one that was going to be rejected and have a nervous breakdown after losing Mike. Then the viewers informed him that they would rather see Mike and Susan reconcile, and so he went along with that. And that's something that happens in a lot of shows that I feel like can't happen in movies so much, where the writers make a decision, or showrunners, they decide how something's going to be, they stick to it, and then they hear feedback from fans saying, we ship this couple, we want this, we want that, and so it actually ends up affecting the way they write the story. And sometimes it results in good decisions and doing what the people want, but other times it results in like less authentic storytelling decisions because they're too busy listening to what other people want. He said he didn't want to frustrate the fans too much and push them too much by keeping Mike and Susan apart for another year while Mike's married to another woman. And he said the fans were demanding it so loudly, he was scared of what would happen if he went against them, which was a wise decision, because if Mike and Katharine had gotten married, that's just creating too much angst and too much separation between him and Susan for sure. Cherry also added that since Katharine will be the one to suffer a nervous breakdown after losing Mike, it's going to be one of the funniest breakdowns you've ever seen. Yeah, funny isn't the first word that comes to mind. Now, this is a very funny show. I laugh all the time. It's one of the funniest shows I've watched in years, but describing Katharine's breakdown as funny is just not in my vocabulary. I'm going to get into that later because I've got a lot to say about the way that Katharine's character was vandalized. But Susan is identified as Mike's bride in the premiere, and her marriage to Mike fully destroys her friendship with Katharine in a really significant way. I wasn't sure how those two were ever going to go back to being friends. After the wedding, Julie is strangled outside of Susan's home. She slips into a coma, and while awaiting for her daughter to awaken, Susan is going crazy, trying to speculate about who could possibly have done this to her daughter. She learns while Julie was in a coma that Julie had dropped out of medical school, that she was having an affair with a married man, Nick, and that she'd had a pregnancy scare before her attack, and all this stuff that Susan didn't know about her because she just always assumed that Julie was the perfect daughter. At one point, Susan starts to think that maybe Katharine strangled Julie because of the fact that Katharine is so like bitter towards her and resentful, because Katharine is still continuing to pursue Mike, believing that he's in love with her. I'm all into speaking stuff into existence. I'm all into manifestation and everything, like yes. But I mean, Katharine was properly like role-playing here. It's not like in her head she thought, maybe we'll get back together someday, I know that our connection was really strong. No, I don't mean it like that. She's going around and telling people, like her neighbors, on phone calls with her daughter, me and Mike are so happy, isn't it amazing? And then going to Mike being like, I know you want me, kiss me, and all this, and like forcing him, making him uncomfortable, and then he's like, oh my god, no. And she's like, I know you want me, I know you want me. crazy. Like, honestly, it's giving desperate. It's giving I'm a needless void of attention. Mike warns her that he never truly loved her, and he gets brutal. He is like, I never loved you, Katherine. You were just a way to pass the time. The whole time I was with you, I was thinking about Susan. She was all that was on my mind. You're nothing to me. You were just some sex. That was it. He goes hard. He says, if you come near me and my family again, you'll regret it. And I read about a lot of people who are criticizing this, saying he's so disgusting, she's clearly vulnerable, and he's like being so harsh. How could he say those things to her? He used her. I'm sorry, I disagree. I could not disagree more. It's not like he was just being rude to her willy-nilly, like whenever. She was pushing him so hard. He tried to be nice, he tried to be respectful, he tried to avoid her. She wasn't getting the hint, and she was annoying him. And I think that he felt that the only way he could actually get the message to sink in would be to be really harsh with it, unfortunately, because I don't think she was going to listen unless he properly dragged her through the mud, unfortunately. She pushed him into doing that. You know, I don't think he wanted to be cruel. After he leaves, after saying that, Katherine stabs herself. And keep in mind, this is after an entire season of trying to seduce him in the most ridiculous ways, like saying, hey, I've got a plumbing emergency, can you come round? He comes around, and then she lays flowers all over the bed and roses and candles and is trying to like seduce him in lingerie. I'm talking crazy behavior, trying to kiss him when Susan isn't there, and then trying to manipulate Susan into feeling insecure about her relationship with Mike, and just attempt after attempt of patheticness. It was unbelievable. So she stabs herself with a knife that had Mike's fingerprints on it, and then she tries to frame him for stabbing her. Susan then realizes that Katherine has actually suffered a proper nervous breakdown, and she's actually like, she needs intervention, she needs help. And so she calls Katherine's daughter Dylan to come and visit Katherine in the hospital. And so Dylan comes to talk to her, and she's like, Mum, you've been telling me on the phone for months that you and Mike are married, and I know that's not true. Like, you need help. Katherine then starts to recover from her breakdown, and in the space of about an episode, she's like, yeah, I'm better now. Sorry, I guess I was a mess and I lost it a bit. I've had some help, I've had some intervention. I'm good now. Susan, can we be friends? And everything just goes back to normal as if nothing happened. After that ridiculously stupid subplot is wrapped up, Susan and Mike start to have financial problems, and Mike has a lot of debt. So they decide to move out of Wisteria Lane temporarily because they really can't afford it. And they move into an apartment across town while Paul Young, who comes out of jail, rents their house on Wisteria Lane, and that's in like the finale. As we know, he'd been in jail for a crime he didn't commit because he was framed by this woman called Felicia, and for seasons now he's just been gone. So I was really hoping they'd like resolve that and bring him back, which they have. So they found out that basically Felicia had faked her death and that Paul had done nothing wrong. Those were Susan's storylines. As you can tell from the way I'm talking about it, I didn't like Susan's storylines at all in season 6. It was also the storylines that were weak, not just her behavior, because so much of the season was her and Katherine having this drama. And sure, the debt stuff involving Mike was interesting, but anything concerning Katherine, I was so beyond done with it. And I think Katherine is genuinely like one of the worst written characters in the entire show. Keep in mind, season 4, Katherine's a badass. Katherine's mean, cold, manipulative, and really ruthless. Then in season 5, Katherine's this sweetheart who's dating Mike and just wants to move on with her life and is treating everyone with love and kindness. She's being manipulative, but it's genuinely, I think, out of a place of just wanting to be loved. Her intentions are pure. She's just a bit of a mess, but she's very sweet. She's a real peach. And now, this season, nervous breakdown. Susan's behavior as well in this whole season was so stupid. Susan accusing Katherine of being the strangler of Julie was so dumb because Katherine does not have the strength for that, and it was just so obvious it wasn't Katherine. And then she was convinced that Danny, the teenage boy, was the strangler, so she literally tried to kill him, because she was so convinced. Susan then gets really annoyed at her lawyer friend Bob because he wants to defend the teenager, and Susan's like, you can't do that, he's the strangler, and we can't be friends anymore if you do that, which is ridiculous because he's just doing his job and there's no proof that the teenager strangled Julie. Susan starts threatening her new neighbors, Angie and Nick, saying that their son Danny is evil and yelling it out so people in the street can hear, he's evil, he strangled my daughter. Again, she's being a drama queen. queen. People brought her up in earlier seasons, like in season 3 and 2, they're saying, Susan, you're a drama queen, you need to work on that. She's getting that feedback. And here she is again being a drama queen. And then Susan was really upset this season because when she told people the news that her and Mike were engaged or had gotten married, she was pissed off that people's reactions were to say, oh wait, I thought him and Katharine weren't they just together a few months ago? Like, what happened with that? What about Katharine? What does she think of this? And Susan was so annoyed that they were, I guess, taking her spotlight and bringing the attention back to Katharine. I don't know why she's annoyed about this or surprised, because if Mike is all committed with Katharine, moving in with her, and then he suddenly breaks up with her to be with you and you're married, very rushed might I add, months later, of course people are going to be confused and ask questions. And this is literally your 3rd wedding at this point, so take a chill pill. Another thing I found really weird was Susan imagines what her life would have been like if maybe she hadn't stayed with Mike and if she'd been with Carl, her first husband, and if things had worked out with him. And there's this really bizarre scene. She's gained a significant amount of weight. I don't know why this was like literally necessary to show. Who cares? Why is this here? But it's totally played for comedic relief, like her walking around, and it looks like they've edited it as well as put her in a fat suit or something, but it looks so genuinely stupid. I'm just bringing it up because it was such a randomly unnecessary scene and it was never spoken of again, so why is it there? But I need to talk about Katharine because she and Susan's storylines were so intertwined, and oh my god, I didn't like the way Susan treated her, I didn't like the way Katharine treated her. The whole thing was just so bad. Katharine was doing stuff the entire season to try and ruin the relationship, and it was the most annoying thing. I'll give you some examples just so you understand how ridiculous it was and how stupid it was. So Susan's wedding dress is delivered to Katharine's place by mistake. Then Katharine puts on Susan's wedding dress and starts cooking in it. And she's like, I think it looks better on me. Then on Susan's wedding day, she arrives and demands that Susan publicly apologizes to her at her wedding in front of everyone, which is too much to ask. Like, when you look back on your wedding day, you look back on your memories, you don't want to be thinking of the drama with Katharine. It's your special day. As if Susan is going to ruin her memories of her wedding day by making it all about Katharine and Katharine's suffering. I mean, if you want a private apology, if you come to her privately and say, I think I deserve an apology, great, fair enough, but not publicly. Susan then refuses and locks her in a closet because, I don't know, it was stupid, but I guess she was worried about Katharine, like, barging into her wedding. I wouldn't put it past Katharine at this point, seriously. But then Katharine breaks out of the closet, and while Susan and Mike are getting married, she runs down the altar and demands an apology from Susan in front of everyone. Susan then, very kindly, I thought, apologizes to Katharine in front of everyone, and she says, yeah, I made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. I was selfish. I'm really sorry, Katharine. I genuinely hope we can get through this and be friends. And she goes to hug Katharine. So she did what Katharine asked. Like, she couldn't have done any better. Then Katharine whispers in her ear, like, I'm not forgiving you. I'm so angry still. So why did you want her to apologize if you were still going to be bitter about it? Seriously, she's spying through Susan and Mike's windows at night, watching them like an actual stalker with no freaking life. Eventually, Bree notices Katharine's bizarre behavior and she's like, look, I can't hire you anymore. I can't work with you anymore because I just think your behavior's really weird around Mike and Susan and it's just strange, so I'm gonna have to let you go. And then Katharine's so angry at her that she goes and gets this sharp thing and scratches Bree's new car. So after her mental breakdown, Katharine is institutionalized for a couple of months. Katharine's whole spiral into madness and insanity was not a funny breakdown. It was, I mean, maybe for another person, sure, it could be, I guess, funny, but I never laughed. It wasn't funny. I found it weird, out of character, and sort of jarring, which I don't think was the effect they were going for. But it wasn't comedic to me at all. It was more annoying, especially because it dragged on for most of the season. I was like, holy shit, when is this going to end? This is so boring. I hated how obsessed she was with Mike. That's all that was going on with her the whole season. You could just see her ruminating. How can I get him? How can I do this? What does this mean? What does he think of me? What will he think if I do this? What did he mean when he said that? Just so in her head about it. And I was thinking, oh my God, girl, you've got a career. You've got friends who care about you. You're young. You're attractive. Like, get out there, meet some new guys. respect yourself, put yourself first, choose yourself. And of course she could voice that to Mike and Susan. She could say, hey, I felt like that was really disrespectful. I deserve better than that. Like, you guys 100% could have communicated that with me. Susan, you should have come to visit me and apologize. That was really cowardly of you. That is valid. Your emotions are valid. You can express that. And I think that sometimes doing that is a good thing because it draws attention to their bad behavior, and maybe they might stop and think about it and be like, oh, you're right, actually, sorry. You know, okay, fair enough. But what she was doing wasn't that. It was just completely disempowering herself and putting Mike on a pedestal. Is this really the dynamic that you want to be creating, where you're a doormat? And if so, then why are you like continually validating that dynamic? Like, why are you doing that to yourself? And I just, oh, it was so awful and stressful. She was a strong character, and yet they destroyed her as a strong character. And her so-called friends were like useless at knowing how to help her. She got painted the entire time as well as the bad guy, the villain, the crazy ex-girlfriend. She's crazy, which was also really annoying, seeing her absolutely going insane and practically hallucinating, because it also really dismisses how bad Susan and Mike's behavior was by making out that Katharine was entirely at fault. Mike and Susan put her through a lot, and she was basically publicly rejected and not chosen, and that is an embarrassing situation to be in. And they continued to act like everything was Katharine's fault, and of course she should have been more mature about it, but at the same time it was crazy how they threw this really lavish wedding so soon after Katharine and Mike had split up. That would have really sucked. It was very like insensitive and tacky, to be honest, kind of braggy, like, oh, look at us, we're so happy, and then Katharine's been rejected. So that was sad as well for Katharine. And I don't like that before she was strong. She was no nonsense. She was literally a survivor of domestic violence. She was very powerful, and she goes from that to this pathetic weirdo who will literally go insane if a man doesn't want her. And so the whole fandom is turned against her. People hate her, and for what? In my opinion, that is character assassination. If anything should have caused a mental breakdown, it should have been having her daughter die, which happened, or being abused or being stalked by her ex-husband, not losing Mike. Is he really such a prize that losing him is such tragedy? Is he really that amazing? It pisses me off too, because Katharine saw the signs. She always had a very strong gut instinct that Susan and Mike liked each other, or liked each other and didn't realize. If that's the case, then it's your own fault for putting yourself in a situation where you know you're being disrespected and where your needs aren't being met, and where you are the other woman, where you are literally disrespecting yourself. And then she gets angry at Susan and Mike, but it's like, you saw the signs, girl. You had an opportunity to back away and not push so hard to be with Mike, but even when you sensed that something was wrong, all it did was make you push harder for commitment rather than standing firm on your own 2 feet. I mean, Mike and Susan have been married first. Mike and Susan had a kid together. They always had a strong connection. They met first. They dated first. And if you can't accept that, then you can't be surprised when things don't work out with him. It sucks, I know, but it's true. Additionally, when Katharine returns to Wisteria Lane, she meets this girl called Robin and forms this friendship with her, and Robin ends up moving in with her. Then Robin starts developing feelings for her, and then Katharine develops feelings for her, and then everyone makes out that Katharine's gay and is calling her gay. Bisexual, I understand, but no one uses that word, which is also so weird. And this storyline just came out of nowhere. And then Katharine says to her, oh my God, Robin, let's go to Paris together and pursue this relationship. It was just so weird. Now, were they cute? Yes, but it was totally like bisexual erasure. I didn't like Katharine's storylines. I thought they were weird all round, and her acting was just off. She was acting so like loopy, like she was drunk all the time, and not in a funny way, just in a like, what is going on kind of way. So I was not satisfied with that at all. It was probably the worst part of season 6. I'm so glad it's over. I'm so glad we've put that to rest and put that to bed, because it was bad. Now I'm going to move on and talk about the next character, which is Lynette. Lynette is definitely pregnant now. This woman has been through so much. She's had like 20 years of raising kids, too much time being a mother and thinking about other people's needs all the time, and doing the washing and doing the cleaning. And as a businesswoman, it would be nice for her to be able to close that whole raising kids chapter of her life. And so I thought it was so fucked that she was then made to be pregnant with twins. So she'll have, let's say, another 18 years of raising them before they go off to university and start being more independent. It's so unfair. I hate this storyline. She is so scared about the thought of having twins so late in life when she didn't want more kids, and she's so afraid that she won't love them because she doesn't really want them. And sure, maybe she'll grow to want them, but she didn't want to be pregnant. She hides the pregnancy from her boss, Carlos, so that she makes sure that her promotion doesn't get jeopardized because she wants to be focusing on her career at the moment, not being pregnant. Gabrielle later discovers the truth and she's annoyed at Lynette. She's like, you should have told Carlos what was going on. You can't lie about something like that. Following a plane crash that happens, Lynette realizes that something is wrong with one of the twins, and she discovers that one of the twins needs circulatory surgery. And then when she wakes up, Tom tells her that the sick baby died, but the other baby is okay. Lynette is really upset about this lost baby. She's really traumatized over it. And later on, her son Preston returns from his trip to Europe with this Russian woman named Irina, and Lynette has this assumption that Irina is a gold digger or has this hidden agenda when it comes to Preston, which to me seems like a huge stereotype about like Russian women, but she thinks this woman's way too hot to be with Preston because Irina's like, I want to get engaged, and she's like, why? You guys are so young. She investigates and finds out that indeed Irina is a gold digger and a prostitute, but then before anything can actually happen, Irina is killed by the Fairview Strangler. Lynette ends up inviting this very troubled teenage boy called Eddie to come and live with her and her family for a bit, but he has these like emotional issues, which I totally think is Lynette's compassionate side, because you can see that she has empathy for this kid and like wants to be maternal towards him. And I thought Lynette was just such a sweet heart with that. And in general, in season 6, I really liked Lynette. There were 100% issues there with Lynette's storylines. First of all, the whole pregnancy thing, A, it makes me feel sick because she didn't want it, and B, the word abortion was never actually uttered, which I thought was interesting, and they totally skim around the whole topic. They keep it very ambiguous, like, what if I don't want to have this baby? What if I can't do this? When Lynette decides to keep the baby, her boobs get really big because of her pregnancy, and it's the first sign that she is pregnant visibly. Carlos and his male co-worker are both sexualizing her for some reason, which is odd because I thought Carlos was past his whole like misogynistic douchey behavior from season 1 for the most part, but then he started behaving like that and I was reminded again of how he used to be. Then Carlos says that Gabby should have gotten a breast enhancement as well because hers are a bit small, which I thought was such a bizarre and out of character thing for him to say, because the whole series he is always going on and on and on about how obsessed he is with her and how he can't get his hands off her and how she's so hot, and now he's like, yeah, you know what, her boobs actually aren't great. And the weird thing about Carlos sexualizing Lynette is because last season she fell over in the shower when she was naked, obviously because she was showering, and he came in to save her and drag her out of the shower, and he honestly was very gentlemanly, very gracious. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't really, I mean, he said that she had nothing to be ashamed of. If he wanted an opportunity to sexualize her and go on and on and on about her boobs or something, that was the time. Another thing I had a huge issue with is, as much as I liked Lynette for the most part this season, aside from a few hiccups and a few controlling things she did, she was actually really nice overall, but I didn't like how Tom treated her with the whole pregnancy situation, because he just seemed so lacking in compassion around why she would feel weird around having more kids, and he was basically forcing her into going through with it. He was saying, you'll learn to love them, I promise. And again, it's like telling her what to do with her body, and it's actually so much more than her body. I mean, of course, it's that she doesn't want to go through another pregnancy, but it's more the fact that she's bringing these kids into the world and she doesn't want to be a bad mom. She wants to give them a good life they deserve, but if she's not really present and not committed to that, she's not going to be there for them in the way that she should. And he's always done this. He always blames her for not wanting more kids. He has since the beginning of the show. And again, there's this undercurrent throughout the whole show of him not feeling manly enough, not feeling good enough, not talented enough or smart enough, not a provider or lost in his life, not a man. And then he blames it on Lynette. It's your fault I'm like this. You don't understand me. You don't listen to me. It's got nothing to do with her at all. The next character I want to talk about is Gabby. She's getting very controlling of Anna, which I thought was such a stupid subplot, because she's like, you can't do this, you can't do that. You want to go out to a club? How dare you? I'll follow you there and I'll publicly humiliate you in front of everyone and bring you home, and nah, so naggy. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, Gabby, first of all, she's not your kid. Second of all, she's old enough now that she's formed, and so if she's messed up, unfortunately, that's kind of how she is. You didn't get the opportunity to change her and raise her, and that's not how she's used to being. And I just don't understand why Gabby couldn't just chill and then wait till she was old enough to move out and let her live her life, because she's not actually Gabby's daughter. And Gabby kept behaving so much like her mum at points and just really smothering, and I don't see the point. I mean, Anna was so like manipulative. To me, she seemed pretty set in her ways, and I think if she did choose to change, it would need to be a decision that she made and not something that was forced on her or nagged on her. Then we have John, that gardener from the beginning of the show, coming back again into Gabby's life like a worm, trying to get her to love him. He's like a little wart the show can't get rid of. And then he thinks if he starts like flirting with Anna and stuff, that maybe Gabby will be jealous or something. And Gabby's like, no, you know what, I'm really happy with Carlos now. That's the end of an era. That's a closed chapter in the book of my life. I don't want you in my life. Go away. I swear, John Rowland is the worst written character in the show. All he does is try and grovel to get Gabby to love him. Like, I mean, it's funny and everything. He's literally crying on the floor about how much he loves her. He has no clear motives, no purpose, no life outside of Gabby. He just wanders back onto the show when it's deemed appropriate to declare his love for her. Gabby's also making these really weird comments about her kids, sometimes saying, God, they're a nightmare, or don't remind me why I had kids. And it always makes me feel like, why did you have kids then? Because sometimes she is really considerate towards her daughters, and she puts on little fashion shows for them and bonds with them, or makes their Halloween costumes for them and genuinely behaves like a mother. But then at other times she's like, God, I miss being single. Or when her neighbors invite her round and when she's sick and they just spend time with her and she doesn't need to look after her kids for once, she puts off going back to her kids and husband for as long as possible, because she's like, I can finally get a break because my kids are so annoying. Does she want them or not? Why did she have them? The next housewife, Bree, I want to discuss, because Bree's storylines in season 6 were okay, but they definitely weren't the best. Like, she's definitely had stronger seasons. Bree is having this relationship with Carl, and even though he's sort of in playboy douchebag energy, he's also starting to say that he loves her and wants to propose to her and all this, even though she's still married to Orson technically, but she's not even bothering to try and make it work with Orson. She just gave up on the whole thing, which I get, but also it's kind of sad. And I never expected her and Carl to be a pairing. She feels like she connects intellectually and emotionally with Orson, but connects sexually a lot with Carl, and so it makes her feel conflicted. Eventually Susan finds out about her and Carl and does give them her blessing, even though at first she's really shocked, obviously. But then when the plane crashes onto Wisteria Lane, Carl is killed, which was jumping the shark a little bit, I thought, a bit ridiculous. Orson starts going down this spiral of being really depressed. He gets paralyzed after that plane crash, so he's in a wheelchair, which felt a bit repetitive because it reminded me of the Carlos going blind storyline earlier. But anyway, Bree feels terrible because she sees how down he is, and it makes her realize that maybe she needs to reconcile with him and make an effort, which was a little tacky to me because I can guarantee she would not have done that if Carl was still alive. But then this young man named Sam visits Bree, and he wants to be her new assistant, and he's saying he's really capable and he's really invested, but then he reveals that he's actually her ex-husband Rex's son that she didn't know about, and he like wants to reconnect with her or something, which was very weird to me because they're not biologically related, so why would he care about Bree? But he was trying really hard to be included in the family and stuff, and for quite a few episodes it seems that he has some kind of ulterior motive, maybe around trying to get the money from her business or inheritance money or something like that. He then tries blackmailing Bree when she doesn't go along with what he wants, and then he threatens to blackmail her unless she turns the control of her company over to him, and he gets super nasty. And he says, I'm going to tell the police about Andrew killing that woman in a hit and run, and Bree's like, okay, fine. And then Orson finds out what Andrew did, which was killing someone in a hit and run, and Orson had never known about this. And then he gets really angry at Bree, and he's like, oh my god, you were so hypocritical. I respected commend you as a woman for having standards and for sending me to jail for trying to hit Mike with my car. But now I found out that years ago you covered up a hit and run that your son committed, so he never needed to take accountability for it. So you're choosing him and protecting him, but you punished me and made me go to jail. So like, what's up with that double standard? Why is that? And then Bree was like, well, this is different because when Andrew committed his hit and run, he was a teenager and you were a grown adult and you did it on purpose and stuff. And he was like, nah, he's an adult now. He should face consequences now. So I feel like your moral rules are really all over the place. I'm not happy with this. And then he actually leaves her for good. Bree then realizes that maybe Orson was right and she does have this weird hypocrisy around things like this. So yeah, those were Bree's main storylines. Overall, Bree was okay in season 6, but honestly, I didn't love her. I felt like she was very much wrapped up in her own petty struggles and stuff. She reminded me a bit of Katharine, like just being very self-absorbed and focused on her own woe, and so she was never looking at the bigger picture. Her dating Carl was a red flag because he's Susan's ex-husband, and I just thought that was a little odd. And she was then trying to organize this secret relationship with Carl, and when Susan's daughter Julie was lying in the hospital after being strangled, rather than feeling bad for Susan and Julie, all Bree was thinking about was, oh my gosh, when will I tell her about Carl and me? Will Susan be angry? Which just felt a little bit out of touch considering Susan had bigger things to worry about, like her daughter being in the hospital. And she goes to such lengths to try and cover up what she was doing with Carl, hoping no one will find out she's a cheater. And so yeah, that was what happened in season 6 with all the different characters. It was pretty juicy and interesting, even though there were some issues there. I just want to point out though, I haven't mentioned it before actually, but there's still this undercurrent of fat shaming and stuff in the show that's happening quite a lot. The way Susan treats Gabby's daughter is odd, and it seems rooted in some sort of dislike for the way that Gabby's daughter looks, which I don't get why Susan's bothered by that because it's got nothing to do with her. But Susan had pushed Gabby's daughter once, and to be fair, like Gabby's daughter was being a bully and she'd pushed MJ, but I don't think that Susan physically pushing Gabby's child was necessary. Like she's a bigger adult. Like, it's just not needed. You could just tell her off verbally and then get Gabby to discipline her maybe. And she's also always making comments about Gabby's daughter's weight. Why? And then she framed her and made sure that Juanita got detention just because she was beating Susan's son MJ in candy sales, and I guess that triggered Susan or something because she wants her son to feel like a winner. She kept her at school and punished her so MJ could win the competition and was making her like scrub the floor on her hands and knees. And it was odd because Gabby of course was being competitive with the candy sales. She wanted to win, but she wasn't like taking it out on MJ, whereas Susan was taking out her frustration on Gabby's kid. So yeah, I've noticed that, and I also noticed that imaginary scene in the future or the past or whatever that was of Susan being a lot more overweight and her imagining it, and then it being made into this joke like, oh my god, look how fat she is. What? It's very weird. I'm going to be back soon with an overall review where I go in depth into the later seasons of the show, specifically seasons 7 and 8, which I haven't talked about yet. So make sure if you want to see that you give this video a thumbs up and follow me on Instagram. I will see you guys for the next video. Mwah.